Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, endless sea. Behind you, the ground trembles with the thunder of an approaching army, a cloud of dust marking their relentless pursuit. In front of you, nothing but water, no boats, no bridge, just waves crashing against the shore, mocking any hope of escape. What would you do? This was the terrifying reality for the people of Israel, moments after tasting freedom from centuries of slavery in Egypt. And what happened next is one of the most powerful and dramatic rescue missions in all of human history. Our story begins in the land of Egypt. For 400 years, the Israelites had been enslaved, forced into back-breaking labor under the whip of cruel taskmasters. They cried out for a savior, and God heard their pleas. He raised up a leader, a man named Moses, who boldly went before the mighty Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, with a simple but world-changing message: "Let my people go." Pharaoh's heart was hard, and it took a series of 10 devastating plagues to finally break his will. After the final, heart-wrenching plague, Pharaoh relented. He told the Israelites to leave. In a flurry of activity, families gathered their belongings, taking with them dough that hadn't even had time to rise, a symbol of their hurried departure. They marched out of Egypt, their shoulders a little lighter, their heads held a little higher. They were free at last. But this newfound freedom was fragile. It wasn't long before Pharaoh's regret turned into rage. He looked around and realized he had just lost his entire slave workforce, the very foundation of his kingdom's economy. Furious at his decision, he summoned his commanders. "Saddle the horses, prepare the chariots." The best of Egypt's army, 600 elite chariots along with all the others, thundered out in pursuit. Imagine the scene. A massive group of men, women, children, and their livestock, walking through the wilderness, suddenly hearing that terrifying sound behind them. The ground shaking, the air thick with dust, and the shouts of soldiers. Panic ripped through the crowd like a wildfire. They were being hunted. Their escape route led them to the shores of the Red Sea, a dead end. The vast expanse of water stretched out before them, an impassable barrier, and behind them, Pharaoh's army was closing in, a glittering line of bronze and iron on the horizon. The people were trapped, their hope turned to despair, their joy to terror. They cried out, turning their fear and anger on Moses. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" They shouted. "It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here." It was a moment of complete and utter desperation. But in the face of this panic, Moses stood firm, his voice ringing with divine confidence. He told the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." As night fell, something extraordinary happened. The pillar of cloud that had guided the Israelites by day from in front of them and positioned itself behind them, forming a barrier between the camp of Israel and the pursuing Egyptian army. A miracle of divine protection unfolded. On the Egyptian side, the cloud brought thick, impenetrable darkness, halting their advance. But on the Israelite side, the same cloud radiated a brilliant light, illuminating their camp throughout the night. It was as if God Himself had drawn a line in the sand, a clear boundary between His people and their enemies, promising protection in the face of overwhelming odds. Then, under the cover of this divinely lit night, Moses, following God's command, stretched his hand out over the sea. A powerful east wind began to howl, blowing across the water with incredible force all through the night. The waters of the Red Sea began to churn and shift. Slowly, miraculously, they started to pull back, separating and rising up to form gigantic, towering walls of water. And right down the middle, a path of dry ground appeared. Imagine the sheer spectacle, the roar of the wind, the salty spray in the air, and the surreal sight of a seabed exposed, flanked by 2 liquid walls held back by an unseen, all-powerful hand. It was a pathway to safety, created out of an impossible situation. With hearts pounding with a mixture of terror and awe, the Israelites stepped onto the dry seabed. The ground that had been submerged for millennia was firm beneath their feet. Families hurried along, parents clutching their children's hands, the elderly leaning on their staffs, everyone casting anxious glances up at the liquid walls on either side. They walked on dry ground through the very heart of the sea, a corridor of salvation carved through the deep. They moved as quickly as they could, their footsteps echoing in the strange, windy canyon, racing from certain death towards an unbelievable deliverance on the other side. Pharaoh's army, blinded by their arrogance, did not hesitate. Seeing the path, they charged straight into it, determined to recapture their slaves. Chariots rattled, horses neighed, and soldiers shouted battle cries as they descended onto the seabed. But once they were in the middle of the sea, chaos erupted. God threw the Egyptian army into a panic. The wheels of their chariots became clogged with mud and jammed, making them impossible to drive. The horses panicked and stumbled. A terrifying realization dawned on the soldiers. "Let's get away from the Israelites," they cried. "The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." But it was far too late. Once the last Israelite had safely set foot on the opposite shore, God commanded Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses obeyed. As he stretched out his hand, the morning light was breaking, and the towering walls of water collapsed. The sea rushed back with violent force, returning to its natural state. The entire Egyptian army, the chariots, the horses, the soldiers who had so arrogantly pursued God's people, were swallowed by the waves. The Bible tells us that not one of them survived. The people of Israel stood on the far shore, breathless and stunned, witnessing the final, decisive act of their liberation. They had just seen the impossible made possible. Safe at last, their terror gave way to explosive joy and overwhelming gratitude. A spontaneous song of praise erupted from the people. Moses and his sister, the prophetess Miriam, led them in a victory song, declaring, "I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea." The lesson of the Red Sea crossing echoes through the ages. It's a powerful story that teaches us that even when we are trapped, when fear surrounds us, and when there seems to be no way forward, God is able to make a way where there is none. It's a timeless testament to freedom, faith, and the courage to trust, even when you can't see the path ahead. It's a beautiful reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can rise like dry ground in the middle of an impossible sea. Thank you so much for watching. If this story inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.